Good morning or good evening, or depending on where you are, of course. I'm Simon from RPG Geek, and I'm here to talk to Tim Shorts and Zach Glazer about creating believable characters. Now, I will ask my panelists to introduce themselves in just a moment. There is a questions and answers application which I've activated, so you should be able to give me questions to ask the panel if you're watching. Please feel free to do that. If if I get an opportunity to ask them the questions, I shall do. But I'll turn to my panel anyway. First of all, I've got Tim Shorts. Good evening, good morning, sir, wherever you are in America. Tim is author of the Gothridge Manor blogspot, producer of the Manor fanzine. We're talking about characters. Tim has lots of NPCs in his Manor fanzine. I remember several articles where he actually sets out, describes individual NPCs. I remember a goblin peddler comes to mind, which I'm sure Tim might be able to tell you about. Zach, good morning, Zach. Zach is proprietor of Lesser Known Games, who produce old school fantasy adventures, as well as the Whisper and Venom fantasy setting. Zach, your adventures are produced in a retro style, aren't they? The first few prints to be redone at a later stage. But one of the things that jumps out at you from Zach's adventures is his attention to detail when it comes to non-player characters. So before we get going and chatting about what makes believable characters and why it's important that we actually have them, can I ask the two of you just to give me a few words about how you got into role-playing games, what your interests are, and also a particular favourite character of yours, either from a game that you've played in or a game that you've been Dungeon Master, Games Master in. Tim, could you start?
Yeah, I guess I got into gaming back in '79. Boring winter night, and one of my friends brought over B2. Didn't know anything about the game. Raided the Yahtzee set for some dice because we had no other dice, and just kind of made up our own rules as we went because we knew it was cool, but we had no rule sets and everything. So we just sort of kind of figured it out on our own, and then eventually collected some of the books and modules and that. We kind of learned the game through the adventures, not the rule books. So it might have kind of been a different way than some folks and stuff. So probably one of my favorite characters that I ever played and everything. His name was Delgoth, sort of a rogue criminal character, didn't have much morals or something, but he always had an excuse for everything. And the person I was playing with was his name was Rob Conley, and we played quite often together. And he had this little dwarf, and I can't even remember what the dwarf's name was because I always just called him Little Brother. And then we would just go cause havoc and trouble, and eventually his time came, and he died as pitifully as he lived, and he got drowned in a water trough by an iron golem, and that was where he was ended. So it was kind of it was a suitable ending for him. I really, most people might get upset, but I thought it was perfect, a perfect conclusion for his character.
So was that your character with Rob Conley? Was that like way back in '79 or was that more recent?
Probably that was back. I want to say when did we play that? We've been playing, because I've known Rob since high school, which is a long time ago. I'm going to guess it was probably more in the late '80s, maybe early '90s kind of thing. I think we were playing a lot of GURPS in those days. I think those were GURPS characters, if I remember correctly. So. Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. It's still one that stands out. Instead of being a hero, he was sort of the anti-hero, and just this was fun to play. Yeah.
So Dalgarth, then, the reason you liked him was because he was unconventional as much as he was the anti-hero.
Yeah, he just and it just worked, especially when you had someone to play off of too. It just wasn't like me being the bad guy. Also, Rob's guy was just as bad, and we just kind of fed off of each other. Just had fun just playing bad guy. we would steal coins from, like if we saw like kid peddlers. I mean, we were the kind of guys that would have just pushed them over and taken their coins and wouldn't have thought anything about it because we just justify it by, we were hungry, so we just took what we needed and everything. Yeah, we'd make excuses for everything that why we would do it. We justified it somehow. So it was a lot of fun just playing those guys.
Was that just the two of you, or was that a lot?
Yeah, it was actually we had Rob and I were the players, and then our other friend Dwayne was DMing it and stuff. So he definitely made it interesting for us.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, Zach, how about you?
Well, like you said earlier, I'm Zach Glazer. John Hammerman and I are the proprietors of Lesser Gnome, which we had a Kickstarter last May. It's been a whirlwind since. We've released one other module. We have another one that'll be shipping about a week and a half, and the Kickstarter starting next week. I'm not sure what else you want to know about that, except we enjoy the games, the art, the NPCs, and the development of the characters is almost the most interesting part, because the dynamics of what makes up an area, a locale, or like a story hook is what really gets it makes it feel organic and real, and it breathes lights into stuff that can be mundane. I mean, how many blacksmiths have we all seen? Well, tons, but how many blacksmiths have we all seen that have terrible addiction problems? Well, fewer, So I got into gaming back in I was 1981 with a Mold-based set. I begged my mother, promised to do more chores than I would ever do, and actually wound up being none. But got a Mold-based set, barely understood it, because I must have been in first grade, but read it over and over and over again, and a few of us would play the dungeon game first, and we would keep on adding little elements until the AD&D Player's Handbook, I got that one year, and that was what I played until 1992. I didn't get a second edition book beyond my shelf, and this is pretty cool. I didn't want to spend $300 I didn't have. But and then I was out completely from any of this, all of it. I was doing, other things. I was in the military, and then I was in worked for the state of Arizona. And then one day I was sitting on a bus, and I was like, wonder if anybody still plays Dungeons and Dragons? And I hit Grognardia, and I realized, yes, lots of them did. And a year later, I had written an adventure because I always wanted to, and it just became part of this whole group of people that it's just been a real pleasure to do. And seeing it active now, I enjoy it far more than I did then, though I don't have the completely unbridled imagination that come with all the baggage of being an adult. But I just think the games are a lot more fun, considering the people we're playing with, the education levels. There really is a lot more to them that make it better and better all the time. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, a bit off topic, but that Moldvay book is immensely readable, isn't it? I mean, it's funny you say that's the one that got you into it. I mean, my son picked up a copy of that, and that suddenly he was into D&D, reading Moldvay. There's something about that.
It's my favorite one.
Yeah, there's something about
my favorite one, because it's the first one, right?
How about your favourite characters, Zach? Do you have a favourite character that you've played, or somebody else has played with you?
I had a character that I played a little bit in RPGs, but actually in World of Warcraft. He was a gnome, but it wasn't the one that's our spokes gnome. I knew him well, played him a long time. He was kind of comically incompetent, but he was earnest and eager. But after doing the writing and stuff lately and paying a lot of attention of how those work into, I would hope, successful products that we write, Bird of a Feather was the last module we released, and there was a little fae, his name was Rumpus, and he was somebody who really wanted to be good at something and do good in this world, and bad things happened to him over and over again, but he just kept going back for more, and I just thought that the way he interacted with a very small environment, I thought was pretty successful. So.
Because I'm interested you mentioned him, because in that module, I think we actually exchanged correspondence. There's no actual stage where the player characters are necessarily going to meet this guy. So you've got this big background for this non-player character that's fundamental to the story, but the characters may never even meet.
No, they might not, but adventures are for GMs too, and I think it helps immensely for a place is not just made up for the things in the place, but the people around the place that change the events and patterns. And having something start a pretty standard like layer crawl, like a bird of a feather, that kind of sets it in motion, was real important to kind of develop a tone with it, because to make it a coherent product, I didn't want 8 rooms and then you fight this, here's your treasure. It wanted to be kind of something the GM was as part of as much as the players were, and they could add all their extras to it and make it better. Because most of the stories I get from what people do with it are way better than I pictured they were going to be. So
it's interesting in that module as well that I mean, I'm not giving you any trade secrets here, but the bird itself has motivations and angst and worries, and it's very the module is very much down to timing as well. Where this thing's going to be at any particular time. So you've written that into the module as well. The monster is the NPC that has the developed character.
And part of that just comes from you want to make each encounter pretty interesting when you have short sessions. And to give the tools to make them more interesting, even creatures like the Reikos, they take on, a persona that lets them, we think, be portrayed in a way that you could enjoy them as well as saw them, but you can also make them incredibly fierce and kind of hungry, and they can take care of a lot of business. I mean, it can be done both ways, and you want to provide the tools for both, so we think.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that leads me on to something I was going to ask the two of you. That in that particular situation, you've got a fantasy environment, a large bird, a fey creature. If you're talking about believable characters, how would you define that in the context of that kind of setting, and not just fantasy, sci-fi? Settings that are sort of alien to our normal existence. And yet we have believable characters. How would you define believable in that context, Tim?
I think most of the ones that are successful, especially genre kind of things, is they have a set of rules or laws that they have to kind of abide by. Like, if you watch, Harry Potter or the Alien movies or whatever, all of them sort of have these guidelines they have to go by. So as long as they stay consistent within that, it helps to, you can develop something in there, because if they pull out even though it's fantasy, you still have to make choices on what is available and what isn't. And so when you have that, scope that you can work within, you can build these characters that work within this framework. You have to have some sort of, the known world to the characters, what works and what doesn't work within them, so they can react to it. So if something does happen beyond their realm of understanding, it's a significant thing. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well or not. But I think it's basically just making sure that the laws are is consistent with the characters and the environment and whatever world they're working in is probably the best way, especially with a fantasy kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. So it's important to have your developed character consistent with your campaign world, which is going to be different for each GM, I guess, isn't it? So where you have somebody that's developed an NPC, perhaps part of the skill of being a GM is to actually slip that into your own world, the player's world, and have it consistent with that to make it believable. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. And you can of course you can always introduce fantastic elements, but just as long as they are within the framework of what you've developed, because if you start if they start playing by their rules, then it starts breaking down, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. Zach, would you agree with that?
I would absolutely. I think he stole the best point by far. You can. I'm going to feel like I'm constantly going, he was right, I agree. I do feel the consistency that you mentioned is super important, because the consistency of how the entire environment interacts with all the characters is a way to maintain, your belief in something that obviously is fantastical. But I think when you're talking about NPCs, generally they're people that aren't going a lot of places, they are of a place. And their interaction does not affect just not the place, but the other people there, because in general, the social interactions and the ambitions and the needs behind them are what drives them. And even if you don't understand why, or they just are psychopathic, as long as they follow, like you said, the consistency and the rules, you can see something in them, and they can do unexpected things because they're, no matter if they're a bird with a giant feather or they're a little fey, in some ways they're human, or we wouldn't be able to relate to them very well. So.
Yeah. Well, Zach, perhaps you can answer this. If you're actually writing something, an adventure, whether it be for publication or just for yourself, it does seem to be sort of similar elements to maybe writing a fictional work where the characters have to be consistent with the setting. Is that your experience?
It's really funny you mentioned like writing it like a fictional work. The guy who did the art for Whisper and Venom was Lloyd Metcalf, and he lives across the country from me, but he came to visit and watch John and I working on the beginning writings for our newest one, and he thought our approach was horrifying. In fact, it was slow, and it was lots and lots of like talking. To him, it didn't seem like we were doing anything, but it was hours of making sure that the situations that existed that formed the framework and the groundwork were fleshed out with enough detail to be real to us, but yet gave enough left to let the GMs really take it and go where they want to with it and apply their own campaigns. Because when you give a product to somebody with NPCs, you have years sometimes of campaigns behind it, people and personalities. They're going to bring stuff that you have no idea what they're going to ever do. And so you want to give them the tools and the interesting things there and not point them in a certain direction. It becomes kind of challenging. So we horrified Lloyd by basically talking the world to death for the 8 days he was here, and maybe 9 or 10 paragraphs. But the flip side, but we still use that as a framework for all the stuff. And so it's the fictional elements, character. You get a narrative and you do your character development. It's all important because fiction is basically a way to describe life and to describe human interaction and human thoughts and feelings. And so we're all playing a game, but it's a shared story. And so all those things are especially valid, and we like to treat it that way. John's a frustrated English major who finally gets to use his stuff, and he's sitting over there so I can say all I want. But he brings a lot to it that I played the game growing up, and so I had counters and tables. Oh, this was great. I love when they did this, and that really random roll for treasure. That was awesome. He didn't care. He's like, well, you can do anything you want. I'm like, yeah, you can. He goes, so there's no rules? Like, no, there's lots of rules, but in terms of like overarching design, you do what you want. Because I'm sold. And character development became a big part of it, because to make a town or a little area, or even like a cave to two birds, an interesting, enough flavor and story so it's relatable, even if you don't sympathize, you can usually empathize with most, is important, because then that gets you right away, you're buying into it. And the GM buys into it, everybody's going to buy into it, or they'd find a new GM, right? So yeah, it's really important to us. That kind of aspect of it matters a great deal, and my writing level is okay, but John is a heck of an editor and a really solid writer that probably writes too few words to say what he wants to say, but we go over the wording carefully, because that's your only chance to tell a GM and share the stories you want to share, so it matters to us a great deal. There's a lot of words to say, yes, it matters.
You haven't seen Lloyd again since then?
Yeah, no, well, I see him on the other side of PayPal because he still draws, and so, but I recommend everybody hire him, but yeah, I don't think he was too excited, like, oh my God, I could grow old watching these guys write 2 pages. But once we get moving, we move fast, but we can't start, without a solid foundation, you can't build anything on it, so we start like incredibly slow. But once you're moving and you have the real framework set, stuff just, it writes itself at that point. Right. But getting there is a long process, and watching it from the outside, like I said, he was horrified.
Tim, have you ever written any fiction?
Yeah, actually, that's where basically my foundation for a lot of this stuff comes from. I guess I'm one of those frustrated English majors too, because that's one of my degrees I have in too. So
sorry about that. I figured
No,
that
no, yeah. That's a perfect description. So, yeah, because a lot of the stuff that especially with character development, I can't even tell you how many books I read for like, you know, character development for like short stories or novels or something. So I probably just kind of got ingrained in me somewhere, one way or another, you know, with that. So yeah, pretty much every thing Zach said, you know, definitely rings true for me also. Getting that foundation down and everything and building on top of that.
Mhm. Okay. I wanted to ask the two of you, just so we get on topic. What are the top three things that make an NPC or a player character believable? And will that change depending on the players that you're playing with? Zach, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think everything changed based upon the players that you're playing with. And back to all the pontificating I pretended to give before, a solid foundation makes that easier to let the players bring their experience to the table and get more out of it, you know, with the solid preparation there. But, you know, three important things: believability, um, motivations. 90% of the time, motivations that if you don't sympathize with, you can at least recognize as, you know, motivations that,
Mm-hmm.
like I must be a horrible person, but I don't trust anybody who's motivated to go out and clean my house for free. You know, so the people who do things for the same purposes that, you know, people you know do, even if they're goblins who steal or goblins who are marauders, you see the purpose and what they're trying to obtain, and so that matters a great deal. And also, I think to make them small details, small, maybe important, but bits of information that give you, like, these people live lives way outside of what you see and give you kind of a glimpse. I think it matters a lot in helping. You can say a lot more about somebody saying what it is that they choose to wear on the side of their belt or what's in their pocket than by two-paragraph exposition about, oh, they got married and then his wife got killed. He carries his dead wife's ring in his pocket, and no, so he's been sad. It's a mood kind of thing, and those things help a lot in setting the kind of tone so you can incorporate an environment, which is the third one, to make them believable.
So it's just one small detail that says an awful lot about a character.
Not
So,
one necessarily, but good ones. Good details help a lot.
yeah.
In my
Tim,
opinion.
anything to add to that?
Oh, absolutely, especially the small details. I always, when I'm developing NPCs for something, whether it's a appearance quirk or a behavioral quirk or maybe the character itself is a quirk within the culture that it's he or she's working in. Like you brought up little Pognog from my one thing. He's sort of like an anomaly in the culture, but he has enough little. He's got a motivation. You know, he's got his little secrets that he does. The players might not ever discover what it is, but if I know what it is, it helps me drive the character, the NPC, and keep it consistent. Because because sometimes if you get inconsistent with your characters, then that's when it's the fragile facade we're already putting up starts to crumble, and so it's good to know, like you said, just the little details can really carry something a long way, and plus it gives you the flexibility too. So like say originally you had the guy be this way, but then as the characters maybe start interacting with him, you come up with something different than what you originally came up with when you're interacting with the players. So it makes it fun. Yeah.
I mean, Tim, Zach was saying that he thought that the nature of the NPC and the believability of it depends very much on the players you're with. So you develop your NPC for the players. If you're developing something for, say, something you're putting out there, like in your zine or in Zach's modules, how do you get over that barrier? The fact that you're developing something for somebody else.
I only have one rule for that one: is if I'm having fun with it, that's all that matters. I mean, if I'm not having fun with it, then I don't think anybody else will. So I really, because if you start trying to like write for everyone, you'll get bogged down and just you'll get paralyzed by that. But sometimes what I'll do is, as long as I'm having fun with it, and sometimes I'll write NPCs for like maybe one specific person I have in mind because I know they'll have fun with it. So maybe I'll sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm writing this NPC for this certain friend because I know when they're going to encounter, it's just going to fuck with them, and I just love that stuff. So, but yeah, I just like when I'm doing it for scenes, I'm just trying to have fun with it. As long as I have fun with it, I'm good.
Okay, same approach for you, Zach, or is there a bit more to it?
Well, I don't know if there's more to it. John and I kind of have a rule because we write all these together, and the rule we have is if we both laugh at it or we both are excited about it, then it goes. I mean, we're going to take it. And sometimes we have to kind of lobby each other for the ones that we think should go into some of these larger games because until we both buy in, they don't go in or they don't stay. And it's helped a great deal to refine characters and make them better. But as for writing to other people, I think I need to know more people. I have a lot of people I'd like to write NPCs for, but I'm not sure they would want to play them. No, but I think that I live in a small town. I grew up in the same small town, and I didn't really have a regular group, so I didn't get to GM much for the same people, and I didn't really get to play as often as I could read the rule books all the time. But so I haven't had the vast amount of experience of trying to be able to take the NPCs and use them in the game as a tool. But I've thought about games so often that I want to make sure that when I write them, they're provided as the best one they can be. So, yeah, to a specific player, I have a couple at cons I want to write them to. But I won't mention who they are. So.
Okay, well, we've talked quite a lot about non-player characters, but then I think the three of us sort of represent the old school gaming movement, don't we? In terms of player characters, I don't know if either of you got a lot of experience with sort of modern narrative sort of story games. I was going to ask you about how important having believable characters is. Perhaps in the old school framework where mortality rates are actually quite high, is it important for players to invest in their characters more than just 6 stats or a bit of armor from an equipment list? What do you think about that, Tim?
It depends on what kind of campaign you're running to. Like there's some campaigns where you run where it's just basically a hack and slash, and NPCs, they just have to be propped up cardboard for them to kind of interact with. But most of the campaigns I run are they're actually more urban campaigns. So there's a lot of social interaction, a lot of role playing within like the city and stuff. So so to me it's important. And then you mentioned like what do they call drama systems or something, like the ones that are coming out now. And I've purchased the like Hillfolk, and I can't remember what the other I just recently got. And they're interesting because I like to see all the different systems and stuff. It's sort of like back when I used to write short stories. What would help me the most is if I went out of my comfort zone, like I'd read poetry or journalism, or try to go outside my area, and then that would actually help me more with what I was really working on with short stories. In this case, I don't know enough about them yet to really say too much about the drama systems because I haven't got a good thorough read with them. But that's one of those ones where I kind of want to take a look at so I can bring it back to my game and see if it can see what it does. Maybe it'll be fun to throw in some stuff in there and everything. So, but
I've had a fair bit of experience of HeroQuest, which is like a narrative game, and I recall the character creation process as being something that would basically be the first few sessions. You'd have one session where everybody was sort of talking about the motivations of their own player characters, and then those would develop over the next few sessions, and then the character development thing would slow down a little bit, and the story, the actual story, the campaign would take over to some extent. But there's a huge investment in player characters in those games. And I mean, I suppose the point I was trying to make is where you have a game system where there isn't that investment, is it improving the game if you do invest? Zach, what do you think?
You know, I think that it really comes down to if you're getting together and spending the 4 hours, whatever it is you want to take out of it is your game. So if you don't have a lot of investment, but you'd like to run a DCC 0 levels over and over again, I, hey, more power to you. I hope you do it with our products. And if you miss some of the parts that we write for that, that's great. But we want to. I want to see everybody do role playing, and I don't think that. I don't know. I think that the GM in their game is really the core of it, and to the new narrative style, I'm not real familiar with it. I'll be honest, except that I know that I like words, and I like to see more of them. I like story stuff, but not so much as like go A to B to C, but present sweeping like places that give you a chance to have stories in them. Those things matter to me. That's why Whisper of Venom was long because I thought that there were places that it could just be expanded by GMs. And so, but if you want to run an really old school style version, we played those, and I don't think I lasted 15 minutes. And my henchmen, they ate it first, and there were 12 of them. So anybody who wants to play these games and promotes them, I just think it's great because the hobby just gets better and better. So.
Yeah, I mean, what you said is quite right. I mean, with the story games, the GM is more a sort of facilitator in the while the players interact with the campaign world, and it doesn't drive the game. It is very much an interactive sort of team event. So for those kind of things, the development of the characters is very important. If you're developing a player character. Which in those kind of games is probably not going to die in the first few sessions. They normally lead up to some sort of big climax. What sort of things?
Well, they're not playing it right. No, I'm just kidding.
What sort of things would be fun to play? Do you think? What sort of tips would you have for people creating those kind of characters?
Tim?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was directed at me.
You wanted to be outside of your comfort zone, didn't you?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Could you ask the question again? I got.
I'm talking about player characters that you're going to have with you. They're not going to die in the first session. They're not going to fall down a pit trap and end up at the end of a spike or anything like that. These are going to be player characters that you're going to have with you for, say, a year, and you can be fairly, fairly confident that you are going to be with them for a while. What sort of things would make them fun to play and believable?
I think like a nice balance of a story or goal that you want to accomplish, but then maybe but then an underlying story that's going on that the GM has developed for your character. To be surprised. Kind of know you're going to go down towards a path, but not know what obstacles you're going to have to hit to complete it. I can think of one instance where Rob was DMing because he's mainly, he's our main guy that usually DMs for us, and we had a campaign that lasted on and off for around 3 years, and it was the same character, and he became a significant part of his majestic waterlands, but it was just fun how it developed. Mercenary guy, it was like 3 different stages of development. He was just sort of like a mercenary captain, had a ragtag crew that he developed into some sort of, I don't know, he kind of got known in the like high-end cultural things. He came because he was a slaver, then he became like a mercenary for like nobles, and then he ended up becoming a noble by the end of it and becoming sort of a significant character. So it was fun to watch, have that development and everything throughout that. So that's what made it a lot of fun.
I think maybe that's one of the sort of fundamental differences, isn't it, between sort of the old style Dungeons and Dragons type games, that the characters will develop over time, won't they? You'll have a set of starting stats, and they'll just let themselves out into the world. Whereas with a narrative type game, the character development all happens right at the start, so it's very front loaded. You'll have a list of motivations and associates and desires and flaws, all those kind of things. And I suppose what I was kind of getting at is it going to be more fun to play outside of your comfort zone, play somebody that you wouldn't normally pick up, and normally that it is somebody that's unlike you, doesn't have your motivations. Do you think that's something that could be fun?
Oh, I think yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's the guy that I'm playing in our current campaign that we're playing. He has like a very high charisma, and I think the last session I was telling the guys, I said, I'm trying to play a very nice character. It's very hard for me, so I'm not used to playing nice characters. So it's out of my comfort zone. So yeah. So we have fun with it. Who knows, because I'm very, I don't know if I want to use the term old school, but I just like playing the guys that roll up. I don't care if I have all 8s and stats, and I'll go with it. I'll see what I can do with them. Sometimes those are the best ones, and see what they develop into. Because sometimes it's not. I like playing Joe Schmo a lot of times compared to the hero. Sometimes it's fun just to play the one campaign my stats were so low. My character was like the torchbearer, but he made significant contributions along the way. So I'm to watch his figure out a way how I could help out. Even though I was pretty useless stat wise and everything, but I could help out in other ways. So yeah, it made it fun.
The torchbearer.
Basically, yep. I was a glorified torchbearer. Yeah.
Oh, maybe that illustrates what I was saying. Zach, have you got anything to add to that?
Well, I could tell you that when you talk about long characters, are going to be around for a long time. Most of the playing I did was quite a while ago before I got back into it, like 2011. Either our characters died the first day, or they never died except through our boredom, because we would have all killed each other. One of my best friends is an attorney now, actually, and we would fight incessantly about the small stuff. If a character actually died, I think we would have burned a house down. So I didn't see a lot of that, but I did see there was a bit churn. Now I think 5e did actually a really interesting job with the backstory parts and a little bit about the character to people who've never done it before.
Right.
It's not an entire narrative setup, but it's enough to say, okay, well, I'm actually the son of a sad clown who actually became a nobleman, or various enough there to get you to think I have a motivation, I have this, and get you into the better parts, in my opinion, of role-playing games are the ones where you're faced with choices you don't have to face in real life that are interesting and exciting. And 5e did a really nice job compromising that without killing you with, well, you're the third son of the noble, the fourth Earl of the Vichy of Nyrond. I'm looking at a Greyhawk map here. Nyrond, it gives you just enough so you don't have to be like, you're not so tied heavily into the setting that you have to know all about it. You can pick it up, look at it, and start to play and develop the character like over time. Because I wish I was born with all these narrative stuff ready to go. Like, well, I was kind of, I was born a fat 30-year-old man who actually needed to, do things pretty set for me. I kind of seeing him develop is really cool. But the hooks that 5e do is a nice way to speed the process along. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move back into our comfort zones a bit, maybe. Talk about NPCs again, then. Where do you start, then, if you want to, develop an NPC? And where I'm going with this is, when you're actually starting with your NPC, do you know what's going to happen to them? I mean, do they become the antagonists by accident or by design? Tim?
That one, I guess it depends on the NPC, I guess, because I definitely will have some that are planted in adventures, but it's funny because, once you let the characters, unleash the characters on your campaign, they do enough damage to themselves to get everybody kind of, so I'll have the NPCs there, and they can definitely get them turned against them or for them. Just like a simple example is like the, nothing I put in too much information about, like a little farming village and that, and the characters kept coming through and not really paying respects, taking what they wanted, stomping crops, just being jerks. Well, then they came through one time, and the villagers, while they're not the brightest people in the world, they kind of figured out their patterns, and basically they poisoned the ale that they secretly stashed, to let them find them, and then the party got sick and got poisoned, and then the farmers went over there, beat the crap out of them, and took their stuff. So it was a lot of fun doing it, and I had no intentions of that happening. The players just were rewarded for their own behavior. So, but yeah, so I mean, I think it happens organically once you start getting into the campaign further. And that if you're talking about adventures, those are probably, like when I write those are more preset probably, ahead of time. But like campaign, you might have some set up in the beginning, but then, like I said, they'll develop over time.
So it's quite interesting because you're talking about a village there, aren't you? A group of people, almost like a superorganism that is behaving like an NPC.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Because a lot of times, like especially like in all the rule books, they and all that stuff. Well, when I think of my gaming world, I don't think so much of races. I think of cultures. I think of like you'll see a lot of my stuff. I'll do small groups. I focus on little small groups and develop a culture out of their certain situation and their what the environment is dictating on their behaviors also and their needs as a whole or whatever. So I do that a lot. That's one of my favorite things to do and write about.
So how about you?
Well, first I just want to say that poison booze, you are a hardcore man.
That's low, dude.
That is low. Every party would fall for that. Poison booze, that they stashed, that is the hardest of the hardcore, man. Those guys must have been pretty bad. That's just awesome. When NPCs, I never thought about this, until I invested so much time in it. I become heavily invested in them, not for what they do to accomplish. Like the one I mentioned earlier, the Rumpus, he originally was designed to start the whole adventure that there was some Fae who was angry because someone kicked his house over on a hunt, and then he all of a sudden was slaughtered by a couple of wild animals, and it started everything in action. But as you kind of made it kind of bring you in a little bit more interesting, we couldn't kill him. He had motivations, and he became quite real in a way, and they change and they develop and they grow, and they're kind of like player characters themselves. And 180s. I mean, we've had some that we've looked at, and I think that they're perfect. They're going to go here and they wind up doing something completely different. Sometimes something really bad different. Sometimes just different, and like people. And I just was surprised after doing this for so many hours. There's not so many years at the board, but there's only hours in a week. How much they start to feel alive because you give them motivations, and once they kind of have the foundation, you almost want to see them in a game. You want to root for them. Like, no, they wouldn't. No, that's a bad choice. But you see the seeds going and moving on to better, like I said, often, almost always better than I imagined their use. And I don't know, it's satisfying.
So when you're developing, Rumpus is a good case in point. When you were developing him, you didn't have it in mind that all these things were going to happen to him.
No, the only thing I had in mind is he was going to be basically left on the beach of the pond. His whole point was he was trying to get vengeance, and he called up something he shouldn't have, and hubris took him, and that was going to be it. It was just a kind of 2-paragraph start, but thinking about him and where to go, and once the name Rumpus came, we're like, we got to keep this guy because he is a symbol of earnestness and wanted to cool little things we liked enough that at least we didn't fully kill him off. The way I don't want to give anything away. You emailed me about this, Si. It was left open intentionally. He was in the beginning, though. Yeah, he was going to be meat. So.
So but he's not a character from a campaign that you've run.
No, he is a 100% grown by that pond in Bird of a Feather. he just was a resident, and he gave the whole area kind of an anchor.
But he kind of developed himself, is what you're saying, rather
No,
than.
absolutely, more than I could have imagined. We left a lot out that turned out to be fun and interesting, and really fun and interesting. But it would have been, well, it's not a book about Rumpus, it's a game for GMs. So we were able to use some of that in hints, and other parts of it, you keep to yourself. You know the story, and it may show up again later. You don't have any idea, but it's there. And I think the character is written with more depth, with all the stuff we took out. It's still there in very small, subtle ways. So he was a hero, though. Rumpus was a real hero. I just want to let everybody know that.
Step it in. I mean, and a lot of campaigns rely on like an arch villain, a big bad, a big boss, or whatever, and the characters might not meet those antagonists for some time in the campaign. I mean, how important is it to have your big boss believable, Tim?
I was going to say Tim.
Well, I think like your big boss, because a lot of times, like when you have like the for better word, arch enemy, big boss, that sort of drives the motivations of the characters a lot of times. So he better be somewhat believable, somewhat, or it's not going to be much of a motivation then for them. They'll get distracted by other things, which is perfectly fine. But if you've got the big boss that is kind of doing stuff, you kind of want to make him believable. But like in a lot of my stuff, they might not know who it is right away. They might think they know who it is, which is fun. And then go off, play off of that, because I've had events where the players were very satisfied that they beat the big boss, to turn out to find that he was just sort of one of many flunkies of somebody else they didn't even know yet. So it's a big part of the campaign if you have a big boss or adventure or something like that. I think that is very important to have that be more than just sort of a cardboard character, because if you've got a cool boss, like I'm going to use a video game reference, so I apologize, but I've been playing Borderlands 2 a lot lately, so that's where it's going. The Jack character they have playing in that, who's the big boss, is just fantastic. He's just so damn funny, and he just drives it, makes it fun. Just makes it an absolute blast. And I think if you can do that with your game or adventure, that's definitely going to elevate what you're doing.
Any thoughts, Zach?
It's interesting. I actually talked to this one with John before, because you gave us some kind of things to think about, and this was one of them. And I think credible. When you're talking in fantasy, credible for a big boss is, to me, has to be a believable threat. It has to also be dangerous. I mean, not just a threat, but one that is, deadly. But in a lot of ways, I think you could have a big boss, a dark kind of lord, but never interact with him, because so many things happen on the way to usurping the Dark Lord's power, right? That his agents, or the simple fact that change is scary to people like myself, for example, in general, because unknowns are what actually drive fear. And so the bosses can change as long as there's never an arc where they go, we've conquered it, we have now taken care of it. Elminster is dead, we took his office. When you know that there's no end and there's potentially more danger the further you go. Like I thought Frank Minster's set did a good job with those. That it keeps a campaign alive even at high levels, and I think high levels are challenging because you snap your fingers, cast a wish, throw a couple of fireballs, and call it a day, right? Those things are tougher, and having a set like campaign arc with a big boss that by level 7 you're like, well, been there, done that, took his wallet. It's change. I really think it's change in the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm. I suppose once the big boss is dealt with, where do you go from there? It's Goldford or whatever. But something that Tim has made you referred to is the unknown. If you're finding out little bits of information about your big boss as you go through, then perhaps that can add something. So, do you think it's important to sort of hold back on the information that you have? And if you're holding back, do you need to develop the big boss at the start of the campaign, Tim? Have I still got Tim?
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up there, Si.
Beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. I didn't get your question.
Okay, if you Zach was saying about beating the big boss being sort of very much a sort of climactic event.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned about the characters finding out about the big boss piece by piece. So should you be holding back information, and what sort of things can you leave for later, do you think?
Well, sometimes like when the characters are going after something, sometimes I might not know exactly how it's gonna end or who exactly the big boss is. Sometimes I'm developing that as they're exploring too. But I think like leaking information and doing that does add to the makes it fun for the character, because our players, most of the guys I deal with, they're smart as hell. So you really gotta really come up with something for them. And right now, let's see, who do I play with? One guy who's a French professor, another guy who runs businesses, another guy's been programming computers forever, and one guy's an electrical engineer. They're all like 10 times smarter than me. So you want to come up with something that's mentally challenging for them too, and they can have fun with, and actually use their real life knowledge to maybe solve stuff. Because it's so fun when I give them a clue and watch all their little heads get together and start trying to figure out, this obscure little thing that I've put down there for them, and they're all Googling stuff, or they're trying to figure it out, and it's fun watching them interact with stuff that you throw or provide them through an adventure that maybe was given through an NPC or their exploration to figure out what the threat is and why is it a threat sometimes, So sometimes they might not know any of those questions.
Yeah, well, there's a key point that Zach raised about realistic threat. I mean, have you got any tips for people on developing that, Zach?
Get married. I'm confident my wife won't watch this, so I can say that. No, tips. I think everything is scarier the less you know about it. Like when I was reading the Lord of the Rings, for example, the Fellowship of the Ring is way scarier in the beginning because there's so much you don't know about what exists, and the shadow. I always mention the shadow and real hints, and the Easterlings, the people from far away that are scary. It keeps tension. Because when you finally go and you capture an Easterling, you find out his name is Emmanuel, and he also likes to ride elephants, and his favorite things to do include walks on the beach. He becomes less of a threat when you see him as a person and not like an other, right? And so the fear and really lack of the knowledge of it is, I would think, key. But, when you're talking about parties being smarter, that's one of the most terrifying parts of writing and producing this, and getting the Kickstarter and spending the money to put in a box to give out to fans of these games is, my God, some of them are the smartest fans, and they're very vocal, and they're so awesome. But when I'm reading it with John, we're going you have to feel like you're an expert about something tiny and small in like medieval culture, or you're gonna look like a fool with 15 of your 200 fans because they know and they expect a level of not intellectual, but smart. They expect you to be treated as smart as they are, and sometimes I don't feel that smart, and so I feel I have to double check, right? But the other thing about that is that what makes me think, well, they have 5 different ways to solve a problem. As a GM, nothing is more entertaining than watching 5 Type A nerds try to fix a problem with 5 different solutions. I mean, that's 3 sessions covered right all at once. I mean, but it's the fact that we bring so much comes to the table now. I mean, most of us are late 30s, early 40s, 50s. We've had families. We've had at least 2 serious hobbies besides RPGs, most likely. We've had jobs that are serious and take a lot of time and investment. Went to college for whatever it's worth, business school. Go to business school, sell gnomes. But all that stuff gathers together so you have way more complicated games. Just like what we liked as kids as fiction, we wouldn't read again as adults very easily, except for nostalgia. The games we play now, I feel, the ones that I get reports on, the ones I participate in, are at a level that I wouldn't even imagine as a kid because I didn't have the foundation to understand the moral choices that we get to have now make. And so writing for it, you want to write in the opportunity to GMs to present moral choices and quandaries, but without saying, well, here's a moral choice, your paladin can do this or that. That's all for them. We want the world to exist that has a little bit of gray, a lot of gray area, really, just like the real world. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our hour now, gentlemen. It's been fascinating to hear what you've got to say. Is there anything, any last-minute tips or hints or observations you want to make, Tim?
I guess this is a off thing that I do for some of my NPCs, especially when I know that's going to be around for a little while. Sometimes what I'll do to help me kind of remind me of maybe how the character was, acts or talks, I'll write down like an actor's name. Like I had one guy that was a shop owner, and so I can't remember. I put down kind of like Sean Connery. So I'll do the worst accent I can possibly do. I'm horrible at those things, but at least it's consistent. Or like maybe a movie character, so that way you kind of have an idea of how they'll act, and it's just a simple little name there, and then it kind of sets you up to, so that way you can look at it and then you'll know kind of what the foundation is, and you just run with it and have fun with it like that. That's one of my little things I do just to help me out, because my memory sucks, so I can never remember what the magic guy was like 2 sessions ago or whatever. So
so a little mechanism for consistency then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any last minute tips, Zach?
What was the question? Oh, memory. No, I'm just kidding. That part, I probably wind up having like uncomfortable sleeping. I don't know, nightmares, but thinking of all the loose ends to tie up, all the things that the detail that matters so much is what, when I purchase, and I have probably thousands at this point of RPG products from small press companies, and I love them all because so much effort goes into them. But I think it's harder to write for them now, like I said, as we get older, because we're more aware of, well, that can't possibly be true or can't work, or you have to grow with the audience. And I think the best tip for that is that I've asked everybody who's played with me, please send me reports. Please tell me what happened. Please, what's going on? And what I get back is so cool that I find that it challenges me to think of it again. Like, well, you really dropped the ball, Zach. That was pretty mundane. It's neat to have the internet lets you have this interaction. I don't think that Gene Wells had that at Palace Silver Princess. I don't think she had a chance to go. I bet they'll tell me what happened. It wouldn't you no idea. But now you kind of get to see it. The community's small enough to where you get the back and forth, and I don't know, it makes it more. It's a great time to be doing this and playing the games for certain. But writing them is a lot of fun. But reading them is a lot of fun. And I think that one of our big goals is to write something that we want to read. And I find that I enjoy reading lots of them, and even like the 2-page dungeons I enjoy for a completely different reason. But I find that it's kind of makes you humbled when you read that there's all this stuff that comes out, and a lot of it's immensely good. So
yeah, absolutely.
So quit making such good stuff. That's what my advice is.
Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This is Tim Shorts and Zach Glazer. Thank you very much on behalf of RPG Geek, and on behalf of anybody that might be watching this on YouTube later. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Si. That's really nice.
Thank you.